I don't have a Facebook page. I lived in South Africa while it was still in the Commonwealth. I nearly drowned there when I was 4. My father threw me into a very deep pool to teach me how to swim. He thought it was very funny at the time. A complete stranger jumped in and pulled me out. I left South Africa to live with my mother in London in 1953. I was 8. Mum was sweet and kind and felt like life would be better for both of us away from my father. They still had rationing in London. I was there for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth and was standing in the crowd on the Mall when they announced that Edmund Hillary had just become the first man to reach the summit of Everest. TV was a small box, black and white only, 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. The Lone Ranger and Tonto were my favorites. There were 2 channels, BBC One and BBC Two. I had developed a bad stutter since I came to England. I still did not really understand where Daddy was. I was in for another huge change later that year when I was shipped off to boarding school. The scenes in Harry Potter, where everyone congregates at the station in London and gets on the train to Hogwarts, pulled by a massive steam engine, are taken right out of the reality of English boarding school start-of-term rituals. At the station, I wanted to project strength and independence and did not want my mom to kiss me in front of everyone. "Stay away," I whispered. "Pretend you don't know me." She was crying. Inside, I was thinking, Christ, I'm scared. I want to cry too. Who were all these other kids with blazers, little caps, and short grey trousers like mine? Boarding school in England in the 50s was very much like Hogwarts, but without the girls or the magic. My school was near a little village in Sussex called Pease Pottage. It was close to Gatwick Airport, which in those days was a 1-runway private airport. The school was in a beautiful English country estate with hundreds of acres and a lake. At 7:30 every morning in the main assembly classroom, we all sat at our desks for roll call. "Here, sir," we said, one by one. We were called up in groups of 12 to stand in a line. Thermometers were placed firmly in our mouths for 1 minute precisely. The school nurse, someone right from a field hospital on the Western Front, yanked the thermometers, confirmed we would live for another day, and popped them into what looked like mouthwash, ready for the next group. As young as I was, I remember thinking, that doesn't look like a very good idea. Then, each boy was assigned to a numbered stall to go and have a shit on cue. If you're not back in 3 minutes, nurse came looking for you. When you reported back, the duty teacher would ask, "Success?" The first time, I had no idea what that meant. I said, "I hope so," figuring I was being asked if that's what I wanted out of life. Success! Oh yes, you couldn't flush, so the results of your endeavor could be examined if they did not trust you to be truthful. We slept in dormitories with 10 to 30 beds. The windows were left wide open winter and summer. No way germs could take a hold. To this day, I sleep with the windows wide open all year round. We all ate meals together in the main dining room, long tables with chandeliers above, groaning with the horror of cabbage stalks and British food we had to eat. I still cannot stand cabbage. When I was a new boy, I was in a constant state of fear. I obeyed the rules and stayed away as much as I could from the older boys. Bullying was rife and really scared me. I managed to avoid most, but not all of it. I wasn't a very pretty young boy. I was plump, unmotivated, and shy. That's why, fortunately, I never seemed to be the subject of attention. But I often saw other boys having their rear ends fondled by pedophile teachers in class, no less. One day, a teacher hurled a blackboard eraser at a recalcitrant boy and knocked him out cold. No worries, off to nurse to slap him awake again and back to class. If you could not swim, you had to learn in a shallow pool called the duck pool, stark naked. When you passed your swimming test, you could then swim in the lake. Not being naked was a great incentive to learn to swim. Better than being thrown in. Every Sunday night, we were shown a movie in the Great Hall. The headmaster pulled out the big 16mm projector, and they lowered the screen from the high-voltage ceiling. I loved those movies. If your parents got you back to the school from a Sunday outing after 5 p.m., you were forbidden from seeing the movie and had to go to bed without supper. One Sunday, Mom took my sister and me to Brighton. We went onto the big pier and rode on the dodging cars. My little sister got her teeth knocked out. Of course, we had to go to the hospital, and I arrived back at school after 5 p.m. No supper, no movie, and off to bed I had to go. On Thursday afternoons, Miss Marshall and her assistants turned up for dancing lessons. We took turns at who was going to be the girl. I even learned how to do the gay Gordon, which incidentally has nothing to do with gayness. I am possibly one of the few Jews who knows the Lord's Prayer and a good bunch of hymns by heart. We had to go to chapel every morning and pray and sing and recite serious-sounding promises. I thought I fit in pretty well. One day we were looking out of the window and a fella stepped out of a car, all dressed in black. He was wearing a robe and a funny wide-brimmed fur hat. He had forelocks down past his ears. I knew exactly what he was. My classmates, having just finished The Merchant of Venice that term, also knew he had to be a Jew. We were aghast. What was he doing here? He came to the front door and was greeted by the headmaster. He entered, and the headmaster called out in a very loud, booming voice, "Where is Schlesinger? His rabbi is here." Oy vey. It seems my mother was determined that I be prepared for bar mitzvah. Rabbi Fabricant. That man was one of the most pivotal figures in my young life. Up to that point, I was not a good student. Unmotivated, slothful, and lazy were words that I heard describing me. In addition to educating me to perform a very respectable bar mitzvah presentation without one mistake, Rabbi Fabricant was retained to tutor me for the next year, helping me overcome my academic challenges. 5 years later, I was accepted into Harvard, America's version of old school. When you graduate school in England, you're known as an old boy. That makes me an old school old boy. I consider myself very lucky to have had old school in my past to give me a sense of conviction that a stiff upper lip will get you through to the next day when things won't be as bad as you thought. On the other hand, I'm glad that I don't see some of the things I saw back then that children had to go through with their schooling and sometimes with their parents. I'm lucky to have a son who is not afraid of me like I was of my father, and who will tell me that I am full of old school shit when I really need it. As a result, and as a great surprise to myself, I have changed many of my old opinions and notions, a very un-old school thing to do. But I still hope for success every morning.